They tell us medieval buildings were dark, filthy and primitive. But here's the unsettling truth that rarely makes it into textbooks. For centuries, these structures quietly kept people alive against cold, disease, famine and war, using methods so effective we still unknowingly rely on them today. Imagine walking into a stone hall in the dead of winter. No electricity, no insulation foam, no central heating, yet the space is survivable, even warm enough to sleep. How is that possible? The mystery deepens when you realize many of these buildings outlasted plagues, ice ages and social collapse, while modern structures crumble within decades. This wasn't accidental. Medieval builders were not guessing. They were responding to life-or-death pressures with brutal efficiency. Every wall thickness, every window slit, every oddly placed corridor served a purpose beyond defense or beauty. These buildings were survival machines disguised as architecture. And the shocking part is this knowledge wasn't written down in manuals. It was learned through failure, through winters that killed, through diseases that spread, and through generations quietly adjusting designs until only what worked remained. Tonight, we're peeling back the stone and timber to expose the forgotten logic that kept entire populations alive, and why abandoning it may have made us more vulnerable than we think. To understand these secrets, you have to step into a world where survival was the primary design brief. Medieval Europe faced relentless threats: freezing winters, poor nutrition, constant smoke inhalation, and epidemics that could wipe out entire towns. Builders didn't separate architecture from biology or climate. The building itself was part of the body's defense system. Thick stone walls weren't just for invaders. They acted as thermal batteries, absorbing heat from fires and sunlight during the day and releasing it slowly at night. Narrow windows reduced heat loss while controlling airflow to limit dampness, a silent killer in cold climates. Villages were positioned deliberately on slopes, not valleys, to avoid stagnant air where disease lingered. Even street layouts mattered, channeling wind to clear smoke and waste. This wasn't superstition, it was observation refined over centuries. When a design failed, people died, and the lesson was remembered. Over time, monasteries, castles and homes evolved into finely tuned environmental systems. But as written science replaced oral tradition, much of this practical wisdom was dismissed as crude or outdated, even though it had been tested longer than any modern building code. Here's where it gets clever, because medieval buildings didn't fight nature. They collaborated with it. Imagine a fire burning for just a few hours in a great hall. The heat doesn't escape immediately because stone, clay and lime plaster absorb it deeply. That's thermal mass at work, long before the term existed. Roofs were steep not only for snow, but to create insulating air layers. Floors were often earth or thick wood, reducing heat loss to frozen ground. Chimneys were designed to draw smoke efficiently, improving indoor air quality centuries before ventilation science. And then there's the overlooked genius of lime plaster. It wasn't just decorative, it was antibacterial, moisture-regulating, and self-healing. Cracks would slowly reseal through chemical reactions with air and water. Builders discovered this not in labs, but by watching which homes stayed healthier. The logic was simple. Dry walls meant fewer illnesses. Balanced airflow meant fewer deaths from smoke. These techniques faded as industrial materials promised speed and profit, replacing slow wisdom with fast solutions that often ignored long-term consequences. What makes this story unsettling is how relevant it still is. Modern buildings chase efficiency with machines, yet often fail when power disappears. Medieval structures were passive systems. they work continuously without fuel. Today, architects are rediscovering thermal mass, natural ventilation, and breathable materials, branding them as innovations while unknowingly copying medieval logic. In survival scenarios, the principles remain identical. Store heat, control airflow, manage moisture, and work with local materials. Even off-grid homes now mimic castle walls using earth blocks and thick masonry. In a world facing energy shortages and climate instability, these old ideas feel suddenly urgent. Imagine cities designed to stay livable during blackouts or extreme cold without relying on fragile infrastructure. That was normal life for medieval people. Their buildings didn't just shelter bodies, they stabilized communities. Relearning this mindset could redefine resilience today, not through technology alone, but through design that assumes systems will fail and prepares for it. So the real revelation isn't that medieval buildings were primitive, it's that they were honest. They acknowledged human vulnerability and built around it. Every stone placed was a response to suffering remembered and adapted against. We forgot these lessons because modern life insulated us from consequences, until it didn't. As energy costs rise and climate extremes intensify, the quiet intelligence locked inside medieval walls feels less like history and more like a warning. Survival isn't always about invention. Sometimes it's about remembering what already worked. These buildings stood because they respected time, nature, and human limits. If this hidden knowledge surprised you, imagine what else we've overlooked. Stay curious, keep learning, and if you want to uncover more forgotten survival logic buried in history, consider subscribing and sharing this journey, because the past may still be the blueprint for our future.